All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Prepper Talk Radio. We got myself, Paris Clough, Shane, and Scott all in the house today. We're super excited to bring some information to you about prepping through the ages. And we have special guests today. Actually, we're going to have Joe Rogan and Randall Carlson on the show today. So it's super excited. We're super excited to have them on and talk to them for a minute. Definitely want to make sure that you guys are involved with our community. We're having so much fun getting to know people in our Facebook group and in our email lists at our preppertalkradio.com at our website. We've got a lot of great links there, great resources for everybody and anybody that wants to know more about how to be better prepared, how to be ready, how to stay ready and get ready and be ready minded. And we have resources, especially where we want to help people understand how to be better prepared with God, family, and country. So we're going to talk about today, let me do
prepping
a quick
through
thing.
The ages.
Yeah, prepping through the ages.
It's going to be so cool.
So do you want to bring Joe Rogan and Randall Carlson on first? And
let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's see what we've got here.
Let's see what they have to say.
All right. So let me just preface this really quickly with this is a video that Joe Rogan and Randall Carlson did in 2015. And he's talking about how throughout time their research has shown that geologically there is evidence and proof of a flood. And at one point, the geological record proves that there was a flood, and that he now knows that if this is true, if these myths or these stories about the flood are true, then maybe the characters, maybe some of the other stuff that's involved with that is also true. So let's see what we have here, and we'll get into that, and then we'll talk about it after.
Of course, we're most familiar with the story of Noah's Ark, because of the Judeo-Christian tradition. But there are hundreds, literally hundreds of stories from all over the world that parallel the story of Noah. Deucalion, Xisithras, Utnapishtim, Manu. The list goes on and on of these culture heroes that somehow had foreknowledge of this impending disaster and were able to take steps to preserve themselves, their family, some diverse cross-section of species, and they all have this similarity. They all parallel. Now, my way of looking at it is this. Okay, we now know from the hard geological record that massive floods have taken place on the surface of the earth. Massive floods, right? Beyond anything that we have even imagined, right, up until a decade or a few decades ago. They're real. Okay, on the other hand, we have stories and myths and legends repeatedly. It's probably the most ubiquitous of all the stories that we've inherited from the past, is this story of this gigantic world-destroying flood that occurred, right? Now, on the one hand, we have the hard geological record, which shows there were giant floods. Then we have these epic tales and myths from all over the world about giant floods. Do we now dismiss those floods, those stories out of hand and say, oh, that's just superstitious, pre-literate, pseudoscientific nonsense? I think we'd be making a big mistake to do that. Now, if we accept that those flood stories, and maybe they have been altered through the time and through the telling, represent something real, what about the other elements of the story? The fact that in so many cases, there was somebody that had foreknowledge. Do we dismiss that out of hand as well? Or where does that come from? That there was one group of people, small group of people, that saw this thing coming and prepared for it, and others who basically paid no attention.
Maybe they were just preppers. Maybe there's the preppers of 10,000 years ago.
The preppers of 10,000 years ago.
On those TV shows.
That explains it right there.
So there we go. The preppers of 10,000 years ago. Those are the ones that were ready and had the foreknowledge and were prepared and were able to survive a lot of these huge catastrophic events. And absolutely, preppers have in mind catastrophic events. There's different levels of catastrophic events. There's these huge floods, there's fires, there's earthquakes, there's tornadoes, there's hurricanes, but then there's also the smaller catastrophic events in each one of our lives: losing a job, losing a loved one, financial ruin, health concerns, all kinds of catastrophes. But those that have foreknowledge, those that are prepared, I love that. Joe Rogan didn't even miss a beat.
Maybe he doesn't usually, right? Yeah, but the issue I think there with me is that, okay, what knowledge do I have? What foreknowledge do I have of what's coming? I have some faith, I guess. I don't know if I have any particular knowledge or wisdom or anything like that of what's coming, but I have a suspicion, right? And maybe foreknowledge is not the right word to use for me. And maybe prepper is not the right word to use for them either, right? Because yes, Noah was pretty much a doomsday prepper. I mean, that's pretty easy to see. But he had the knowledge because he got it directly from God, right? But in being, what's the right way to this analogy? With looking to the past, I always say this: look to the past to prepare for the future, right?
Yep.
The best way, and I wrote this down: the best predictor of the future is the past. So I guess we do have knowledge, right? I guess we do have foreknowledge. If we compared Noah's day to our day, we have knowledge of what's going to happen. Maybe it's not going to be a big flood, but some other kind of disaster.
Well, and if you take it along those same lines and you apply the thought that those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Okay. We take that and apply it. Okay. Go back all the way to Adam and Eve. They had a perfect supply chain, everything around them they needed. They were told not to eat a certain tree or plant or bush, whatever, the forbidden fruit. They ate it and they got kicked out of their perfect existence. And now they're like, hey, we get to fend for ourselves. And that's good for man. God said it's good for man. And that by the sweat of thy brow shalt thou work all the days of thy life. That's good for them. Well, then fast forward, jump a little bit, way, lots of jumping. Enoch, see how fast I jumped forward? Enoch and his whole city became a bug out city. And they were taken away. They were lifted up. Moses, I almost jumped to Moses, but let's stop at Noah. Noah had a bug out ark, a BOA, and he took everything into the ark. I never thought of it this way, but this is kind of like this. There's applications here, so roll with me. So then, let's fast forward. Moses, right? Well, let's stop at Joseph. Joseph of Egypt first. The Pharaoh's like, we got 7 bad years and 7 good years. Didn't know what it meant. You just saw the 7 cattle and the 7 corns and everything was there. And he was like, if you don't figure this out, you're dead. Okay. If you don't figure this out, you're dead. And Joseph's like, oh yeah, you're going to have 7 really good years followed by 7 really bad years. And they put up in store. So they had a bug in scenario. And then his brothers who'd sold him into slavery and then lied to their father, they were at risk, and they're like, we've got to bug out. We can't stay here anymore. Let's go over there. They've got resources. And the price was they lost their liberty for their future generations. And then Moses bugged out of Egypt with all of the Jews, all of the 12 tribes. And they were on their journey. Notice that it wasn't solo. It wasn't, gray man, lone wolf. It was a group. Now we look at our day and we've seen the financial cycles repeat over and over and over. Every time they go to fiat currency, it only lasts so long, and then it crumbles. You look at the governments. Government systems only work so long until they crumble. Every time it's been a democracy, which they're forcing on everybody. They are destined to fail. So absolutely we can look at the past, learn from the past, and apply it towards our future. So what's coming down the pipeline for us? Well, for me, it's more prepping, because we've seen how this story ends from a biblical perspective. From a economic perspective, we've seen how this story ends and transitions or changes or collapses, right? We've seen those things. And so what can we take from the past and learn from? Oh my gosh. If I could be Peabody and Sherman right now, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, and time travel and go back and see things, who I want to spend some time with right now? My great-great-grandparents. They lived hand to mouth. Like that generation. This is 100 years. Well, not even 100 years. This is 80 years plus before the Depression. And the only thing that they didn't produce themselves were their tools. And once they got the right tools, they could produce everything else they needed. They didn't have tools for their plows. They didn't have that. They when they got to the United States and they ended up migrating all the way west, like so many of them, they didn't have anything. And they got to somewhere and they trade their work, their toil, their sweat to get money to be able to buy tools, or trade eggs or meat, or potatoes, or whatever they could grow or use as a medium of exchange to get what they needed. And it's like, that's where we're headed. That's who I want to learn from.
Yeah, that's where I think the word prepper is very limited. Because it seems like those who began on this journey of being prepared, whether it's starting for 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and a year, at that point, like, okay, where am I going with this next? Am I going 2 years? Am I going 7 years? No, it's about a complete lifestyle change. I mean, for me, and I think a lot of people I see out there is that once people see what's coming and they realize, oh, you know what, I need to make a change, and not just that change of storing more stuff, but realizing that all that stuff you store is not going to last forever, and that you've got to come up with a way to get more, in particular food, right?
Right.
So the homesteading kind of is the next word, the next level of prepping, right? Is I'm not a prepper anymore. I'm a homesteader. I've changed my life. I'm living out on my own land. I'm working my land. That's a big, long process. I mean, for me, and some people can maybe take the jump, but again, like you're saying, Scott, this is, going back 100 years, 80 years to our ancestors, and changing the way we live, realizing that our normal, it wasn't normal back then. It would have seemed extremely abnormal. Say, oh no, I don't have a garden. I just have a job and I buy stuff from everybody and I don't produce anything. I just take, right? Where the key to any economic cycle is the production side. It's not the purchasing side, right? Here in the US, all we do is buy stuff. We don't make anything. We make very little, right? Compared to China and other countries. We just take, we print and we take. We need to change that completely and be producers, at least of our own food and whatever we can.
I think that's an example of where the microeconomy always wins.
Got to start.
If you look at macroeconomics and microeconomics, like the study of it is phenomenal. Like the big stuff, the macro, like world's banking, international banking, the different things going on from government to government, like it gets big, right? And huge supply chains. But when you have a tiny little micro system, it's so much easier to manage and prevent loss and to keep everybody afloat, right? It's really phenomenal. Like you go back, those 3-4 generations and you see like when it's time to harvest, how many people come out to help everybody harvest? Like how many stories have you read? How many family histories have you gone through where the entire community goes to help so-and-so finish pulling up all their, like, sugar beets, huge in Utah, right? Potatoes, huge in Idaho. Corn, huge in the Midwest. Like they'll go out and everyone will work together to harvest. And there's this huge harvest. And then they have this huge harvest ball, or not harvest ball, but like a big party, end of the season party where everyone, and they celebrate because they all worked so hard to get everything taken care of for the season. And it's like communities really came together for that. And throughout the year, if there's an issue, you knew who to rely on because they were there helping you go down the rows in the field to take care of things. And that's what I think we're losing as a society, and what we need to start rebuilding and working towards is really focusing on community, really focusing on transferable skills, like the skills that will help your community. Look at where's the gaps and what things need to be solved, and I'll go learn those things. You're going to see different skills and gaps than somebody else. And if we focus on the things that interest us in fixing that, we're going to be 10 times more valuable to each other.
If you think about the history of the world, I mean, whether you go with the biblical timeline and, or 6 or so thousand years, or you go with the whatever timeline, either way, thousands of years, people lived off the land. They lived And even, a lot of people will say, well, with modern technology, we can live longer and we have better lifespans. Well, I don't know. Abraham was 140 or 30 or 40. Like the average lifespan today is 85. That to me seems like we went the wrong direction. So what were these guys doing back then? They were living in a more natural state. They were living with the skills. And Abraham was even a kind of a wanderer. He didn't really have a place where he stayed for, as a permanent place. He went around and he was the father of the house of Israel, the grandfather, sorry. So I just think about in the grand scheme of the history of the world, the last 100 years is what's that? That's like a fraction of a 1% or something of the whole time, where the majority of our history has been agricultural. It's been where we all had skills and did our own thing. And then you look at these societies over time where, like, I think Scott shared this on our last podcast. He shared that, strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and then weak men create bad times, and then bad times create strong men. And so it's that whole reality of you really work hard, you have to build up your own society, and then another generation or two goes by and everybody's living off the fruit of the labors of the generation or two beyond. And we don't have to work hard because we're living off the fruit. We got all the trees were planted, the crops were grown. We're just living off the fruit. And that's when that collapse, every civilization that has had a significant collapse is when you get these lazy, entitled people that are just living off the fat and living off the fruit of the work and the backs of the people, whether it was the people at the time or whether it was the generation before. That's always when a collapse comes. And right now, I don't know of a time in recent history where we've been so entitled. And that's why I'm seeing some of this collapse moving forward. So yes, absolutely. We have to look to the past to be ready for the future. And we're in a position right now where we've got a generation that wants to live off the fruit of the previous generation or just live off the fruit of the government. And so that everybody else, like, well, I want the government to pay for everything. Well, where do you think the money comes from? You can't
print it.
Yeah, right. The people who don't want to work want to live off the backs of the people who want to work. And the people who want to work eventually aren't going to work because they can't enjoy the fruit of their own labors because they're getting taxed so hard. So that's just,
we just want to be, those of us that are working so hard, we just want to be left alone.
Yep.
If we're allowed to just work hard and take care of our needs, like we don't have to work all the time. The reason we have to work all the time right now is because of freaking taxes from the people that don't want to work. We just want to take.
And, I think regardless, we need to work. We wouldn't be working all the time, but it would be in different ways, right? Not working for the man, as they say, right? Working for the man, away from the family. I was curious about this, and before part of my show prep, as I was looking back, when did these things change? When was like a noticeable change in our lifestyle? And the first thing I came across is really the end of World War II, right? Where everything, there was a real boom there in industry and in home building and births, right? A lot of stuff just really boomed. Boomers. Yeah, at the time, that was a big boom. And what I also learned is that during that time, right about that time, when all these houses were being built, that's really kind of when the front yard, the lawn was not, I wouldn't say introduced, but became mainstream, is having a grass for your lawn instead of gardens, right? I look back all the way to like 1800. Take a guess at how many people were involved in agriculture in 1800. What percentage of the population? What would you say? What was your guess?
95%.
75%. 75%.
High 70s, low 80s, but
yeah, of the American population were directly engaged in agriculture. And so that's hard work, right? We're never going to get out of work, right? It's just what kind of work, what quality of work is we're doing. Is, are we doing something meaningless sitting at a desk, or are we striving and struggling for our own survival every day by gardening and build, getting our own food out of the ground?
When you're building for yourself, it's so much different. Like I'll sweat and bleed and callous my hands if I know it's mine and I can have it. That ownership, that's what life, liberty, and property are all about. That's the whole pursuit of happiness, is to be able to have, my labor into something that I get to keep and own and have as my own. That I'll die for that.
Yeah, and obviously that's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. God believes in property ownership, right? In us taking something and creating it, calling it our own, right? Whether it's taking a piece of land and turning it into something valuable that produces crops that you can sell or to others and make an income on, right? So it's all part of the plan. That's all part of what we're here for, right?
Well, it's like you become such an amazingly well-rounded person when you work on those things. Like I've found that since getting back into gardening, I'm so much more at peace about just everything. Spending time like caring for something else, helping something else grow is hugely beneficial. Watching the whole movement towards homesteading again is probably been one of the most joyful things to see happen. A lot of the preppers are moving to homesteading, or at least incorporating homesteading. And I'm seeing so many people, even non-preparedness minded people, tons of them are going into homesteading on the right and on the left. They're like, this is all crazy. I'm going to go get some ducks and some chickens in the garden. And they're simplifying life in so many ways. And I'm like, wow, I don't have to do everything I was doing before. It's a different type of work, right? It might be more manual labor, but it's people are finding that they're appreciating it more and they're enjoying it more. And one of the interesting things is, the government wants everyone to come to cities because in cities you can control things better. Mm-hmm. You can't control someone who has their own land, who has their own water supply, and who has their own utilities figured out. Not that you even necessarily need them. There's ways around it. I have so many family members that grew up without it completely. It was my grandparents were the first ones that actually had electricity in their homes. My great grandparents didn't until they were adults. That's a big shift all of a sudden. And now, like, we can't even think of how would we live without it.
Mm-hmm. We wouldn't. We already know that. We know that this world would go into chaos without power because
they created a dependency on it.
So I think prepping is just a stepping stone to then becoming more self-sufficient, self-reliant. And I guess the right word was, I don't know if they even called that self-reliant back in the 1800s when everybody's, 75% of people were working in agriculture. I don't know if you call that self-reliant. Maybe they did. Maybe they just called it life, right?
Mm-hmm. Remember they used to call it the simple life?
Right.
Mockingly. They would call, you're living the simple life.
Yeah, I got to get out of this. I got to make my life complex.
I am living the simple life.
City, right?
Right, and they glamorized it, and now people have bought into it.
Yeah, here's something I wanted to share with you guys. I came across this Indian proverb a couple weeks ago, and it really hit me hard. It's this is what it says: wisdom comes only when you stop looking for it and start living the life your Creator intended for you.
Ooh.
And that just really struck me so hard. And man, you know how I get. I get teary when the Spirit hits me. Man, that shook me because we all have to have our 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, because we've set ourselves with the mortgage and the car payment, and the insurance and all that. And then you struggle through that and you realize this is not what I thought I'd be doing when I was 14, right? I was going to be a photographer or whatever, be traveling the world, whatever it might have been. But once you, I think, get to that point, you're like, things need to change, and they don't typically want to change for the more complex. I want to move to the city. I want to get a tiny apartment. I want to work for the man in an office. I want to walk or ride the subway. No, it's the opposite, right? It goes the other way.
You don't want to live the box life?
Come to me.
I mean, a box car on the way to work.
Where I am right now, this is where I am right now.
Showing off the cattle.
So
are they out there? I don't see them.
They're gone. They're up on the mountain now. So.
Oh, there you go. Cooler grounds. But yeah, it's the box life. Like we were sold a box, and we go sit in a cubicle at work, right, or a little office, a box. We sit in our box with 4 wheels and drive to that location. We're tied to a building. We've got our space in that building, apartments and even homes like right next to each other. There's not enough land where I live, or more importantly, there's not enough water where I live to make the land usable enough year round to grow. there's parts of the world, if you look at go east, as soon as you hit the plains, the waterfall is completely different. The rainfall is completely different. You need a lot less land to be self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And back in the day when they were parceling all the land out as they're expanding the United States, it was based on rainfall. And it was amazing when I learned that.
Family needed to support itself depending on where in the West they ended up in. Yeah, some places 40 acres, some places 4,000 acres,
Yeah, it went from 40 acres to 4,000. In Idaho, it's 4,000. And I'm like, how do you work 4,000 acres? Well, it's just that's where you need that much water coming out of the land to be able to produce everything you need. So yeah, there were so many people that homesteaded in Idaho when Idaho first became a thing that they gave up because it was too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the thing about the box
men.
life. That's I think where it came from is like when times get good, men get weak and they see, oh, look how simple this would be for me to live in a small box and not have land to take care of, and all I got to do is go sit at this desk all day, and then it makes it simple, or maybe easy.
I can go to the store and it'll already be there for me.
Stores
it'll
on the
be
corner.
harvested.
I don't have to go but a mile. In some
you
of
don't
these
need
big cities.
You don't really need what's at the store. I just had an epiphany. We need to start thinking outside of the box. Like prepping and homesteading is outside of the box. If you look back in history, and the people who were the most happy were living outside of the box. Like true joy, true happiness, we can choose to be happy, but it's experiencing the hard times. It's experiencing the sorrows and just loving the joyful times, right? And appreciating the hard times.
And I think there's another element to that came to my mind not too long ago is, that you hear all these authorities talk about how, oh, there's parts of the world that they live only $2 a day. They're poor. This is poverty. It's terrible. Those people are some of the happiest people on earth. And that's a fact. They're not stuck. They're not shackled to debt and all the possessions that we have. They live a very simple life, and people feel bad for them. That, oh, we need to bring civilization to these people. And there was the movie, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. It was with Harrison Ford, and he and his family moved to the Amazon because they wanted to get away from civilization. But then he took civilization to the Amazon and ruined it. That's the way it happens, I guess.
I'm like, what movie was Utah, that?
Yeah, it was called, it'll come to me, but Mosquito Coast, is that right? But it's a very interesting. He makes ice. He said ice is civilization, but we moved away because we wanted to get away from civilization. But then he brings civilization to the jungles. It's just a very interesting show.
My brother lived in Cape Verde, which is off the coast of Portugal and West Africa, actually. Yeah, it's just it's an island that's a volcano, and he was a missionary there. And he said the kids would kick cans down the road as soccer balls, and they were the happiest kids ever. They would create with bottle caps. They would create these little cars. And he brought back a car that he'd found one of the kids had made. And it was like, instead of Matchbox or, the cars that we can buy at the store, they would make them. And they had a skill set. And see, these are some of the happiest kids ever. I see kids today that are, what do we have today? We have high suicide rates. We have people that are depression and anxiety and panic attacks and all this stuff. And I think to myself, is it worth it? It's literally the consequences. We're seeing the fruit of what we've done to ourselves and for ourselves. There's nowhere there's a few places in the Bible that talk about people having some crazy experiences, but you realize that most people, that there wasn't any of these diseases back then. There were other diseases, of course, but there weren't some of the ones we have today. And some of those diseases that were back then have been eradicated. So I'm grateful for the modern technology for that. However, I think we've created a whole new set of different ones to substitute for those with our own, with all this anxiety and stress and everything that we bring upon people. Stress is one of the biggest causes of disease ever.
And we look at our life. It's pretty darn easy. We have heated homes. We have air conditioned homes. Back in the days before power, in particular, right? What did most families do all year long? It was preparing for winter, right? All year long was getting ready for winter to store up for winter. And so we might call that prepping, right? You just might, think, oh, that was normal, right? Oh, we got to get the seeds in the ground as quick as we can because we need to get this crop up and get another crop in before we get freezes again. And it was all about preparing for the winter, for the hard times, right?
Yep.
And I look back and the biggest influence in my life when I was a kid was Little House on the Prairie, right? Did you guys watch that?
Oh yeah, loved that show.
That was love that show, and I didn't really appreciate it as much until obviously I got older, started watching again. My wife, she had it was on TV, and she would watch it, and she got every single movie. She got a whole CD, DVD stack, watching all these. And I wish she would watch them some more now, because it would probably help her be a better prepper too, right? But a lot of lessons to be learned from the Ingalls family and how they live, and they were always, they were always engaged in a righteous cause, I tell you. And it seemed like it was a lot of times for survival, right? It was it was about their survival, and that's the way it's been for thousands of years, right?
Theirs or someone else's. A lot of time they're helping someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that life is so much better when you're actually making a difference, whether it's for yourself or for someone else. I shared this a few weeks ago, just had an opportunity to serve, and I was like, my goodness, this makes you feel so good to help somebody else. And that was one of the things I always loved about that show, is like, oh, they're helping so-and-so this week.
Always helping somebody.
Oh, so-and-so's lost in the woods, or, someone's missing, and
someone's in a bind.
Jobs too.
Community shows up and goes help them plow their field or harvest their crops or whatever, dig a ditch or whatever. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was a big part of the show.
I think a cool thing that people used to do back then was like barn raising. Didn't they do barn raising? And they could help you build your house.
Build a house, build a barn. Yeah.
Super cool stuff.
Well,
like you guys did
now.
Come out to my property, help me build that, build the Quonset.
Right? The Quonset. Yep.
Quonset. We raised a Quonset in a day.
Yeah.
Well, part of it, most of it.
Most of it, yeah.
It was raised. It wasn't finished.
Yeah.
But like the Amish will raise a whole barn in a day.
And probably finish it as well.
And like I was watching this most fantastic video about the Amish last year, and they were showing how there was a flood coming and this guy's barn was in danger. And the entire community came out. And I'm like, how are they going to move this? Like, they're going to have to tear the whole thing down and move it. And they lifted the whole barn,
and this thing is
it 80
enormous,
feet.
Right? It's like 100 by 100, this huge barn.
Oh, it wasn't that big. It was like 50
I've seen them move huge structures like that.
But like they'll just each person lifts where they stand. There's a talk by Dieter Uchtdorf, who he's talking about they need to move this piano. And everyone's like, well, let's figure this out. We're going to do it this way. And they like overly complicate it in so many thousands of ways. And one guy just goes, why don't we all just lift wherever we're standing? Like, let's just lift where we stand and move this thing. And they did, and they moved it. And it's like, that's what the Amish were doing. Lift where you stand. Like wherever you are, do something, lift, make a difference where you are, for yourself, for your family, for community. Like, and if you look through the history of prepping, that's what they did. Like, and now we're seeing the cycle come back where the weak men have created such soft times or basked in such soft times that they're now going to be very, very hard times. And it's going to take those who are awake now. You people who are listening to this are the ones that are going to thrive in what's coming next. Is it going to be fun? No. But are you going to have fun? Absolutely. That's up to you. Is it going to be the most horrible thing that's ever happened to you? Probably not. Is it going to be bad? Yeah. Wasn't other things that you've gone through bad? The things that have made you better, those are bad too, right? So when people start freaking out about everything, it's like, man, it's going to be tough. It's going to grow you in so many ways. And you're going to be such a better person if you let it do its job on you these tough times. And the movement to homesteading and to prepping and the more self-reliant lifestyle, it's flourishing right now. There are so many people that are going to be in a better situation in 2 years than they are right now, even though times are going to be tougher. And that's the side of the group that I want to be on. Like, and it's funny because I meet super liberal homesteaders and I meet super conservative homesteaders, and I meet more than anything the people kind of in the middle, more of the libertarian kind of group, but just the people that just want to have a higher quality of life and recognize that I can take care of a lot of the stuff that I thought I couldn't take care of before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier than we thought. Like, it's been made to look really hard.
Yep.
It's been made to look almost impossible.
Mhm.
Like, we're Rocky and living a self-sustained lifestyle is Ian Dragoff, right? Like, he's going to beat the crap out of us, but we're going to come back in the next Rocky and beat him, right? But we got to go to Russia to train to make that happen. No, you don't. Just get back to the basics. Get in the barn. If you don't have a barn, build a shed. Like, start somewhere small. Have fun. Learn. Get your hands dirty. Learn skills. That's what they did. I look back at how many of our grandpas and great grandpas and great grandma. Oh my gosh, my grandma. She could do almost anything. Like, I could never second guess where her limits were, because she could figure it out and do it. You know, those are the types of people we're going to be turning into in the next 5 years, decade. Like, that's the type of people we're going to become again. People who are so capable that we're going to blow the minds off the box people. Like, the person you're like, the person who's sitting there now and that's afraid is like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. You look at yourself in 5 years, you will be absolutely floored and impressed in so many ways as to who you are if you let this build you into something better.
Otherwise, you'll be dead. You know, one of the two.
Or you'll be dead.
Yeah.
Right. And it's because you're taking action that's going to give you the chance to build into that better person, to grow into who you're meant to be capable. And that's the thing. Prepping isn't about, hey, I bought a box of food storage. It's about knowing how to take care of things. And so, yeah, prepping, not the best word.
Yeah, I've been
Awesome
trying
is
to,
the right
to
word.
find trying to find a different word that would be more appropriate, but I haven't come across it yet.
Just a human.
Just
being alive.
a human
I know
being.
that over the last little while, my wife has learned how to make quilts, and she makes the most beautiful quilts. I mean, that to me is a lost art form in many ways, because in fact, she actually bought all this material and she bought all this stuff, and she was going to sew and she was going to make all this. I said, how much does all that cost? And she told me, I says, it's cheaper to just buy one. But I realized, wait a minute, she's learning a skill. And that's worth more than the money we spent to buy all the materials, all the fabrics and everything else. And she's actually been able to repurpose some of that fabric and make more than 1 or 2 or 3 quilts. And now it's actually better. It's actually a better deal.
And you take some of your old worn out clothes and you turn those into new quilts, right?
My favorite quilts are those denim jean ones that you took all your old jeans, or the ones where it's like all your old t-shirts.
I've got one with my name stitched in it.
There you go. So those are the coolest things, because it's like you can hand those down from generation to generation. That quilt you just go bought from somewhere else. It was made in some factory by people who were being paid far too little. That thing lasts a few years. But that quilt that you made by hand, like those things are, man, those things.
And it has no meaning, right? It has no sentiment attached to it.
Yeah. I still have a blanket that my grandma crocheted for me. And I love that thing. It's an Afghan blanket. Or is that what it's called? Afghan blankets? I don't know. The knitted ones.
Yeah.
And she made that for me. And I got it when I graduated high school. She made one for every grandchild. Those are the most amazing. They
last forever too, seems like.
Just they're the best, because they have sentimental value, but they're also, hey, guess what? They're American made. You don't have to worry about it. Like, they're American made. Like, it was made in America.
Yeah, exactly.
It was made in Idaho. It's Idaho made. But like, whatever you're making is going to be way more valuable than anything else you're buying, because the time that you put into it, the things that you learn as you're going through it, the things you figure out, and your mind starts working in a different way, because then you start problem solving everything else out.
Well, I think unless we make a conscious choice to turn this way and do these things, we're going to be compelled to anyway, right? Things are changing to where we can't get things, and I don't know that that's going to get much better. I mean, it may be for a short while, and then it'll get to the point where we can't get anything, so we're going to have to do these things ourselves, right? Become more industrious. And so might as well choose to make that step. And maybe you make blankets, maybe you make horseshoes. I mean, who knows? But try and figure something out. And I know I'm still working on figuring out, what skills, what trade I want to try and take off out here in the country here, and something that I can do out here.
Well, even if you just take an hour a day and do something, somebody says that an hour a day is only 4% of your day. But if you compound an hour a day for 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're going to be so much further along the road. I mean, you're going to be 3 or 4 or 5 years older anyways.
Mm-hmm.
You might as well have a skill set along with it. I mean, if you're going to get old, and you might as well have something that you can provide as a skill set along the way as well. So that's something that's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that video clip you played at the beginning, were there preppers 10,000 years ago? I think there were nothing but preppers, right? That's everybody was a prepper. They did, I think, truly foresaw what the things that were coming, because, well, first of all, they weren't bombarded with propaganda every day. All is well, go buy, right? And they were probably had no shoes. They were grounded to Mother Earth, right? They were working the earth. They were in touch with her, and they could see when things were off kilter, right? When, the weather's not quite the same as what it should be. Are we expecting a storm or an early frost or whatever, right? They knew those kind of things where we're just completely out of touch. We have to pull out the smart. What's the weather like? Instead of looking outside. Oh, look.
Yeah, my cell phone said what time,
exactly. Like now it's
is.
raining. It's beautiful. Love it. And instead of worrying about that, you just go on with your life, and you get wet. You're on the field, you get wet. Oh well. So,
it's not the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that video, clearly there's a period it shows the human nature. There's a group of people that are just la-da-da, woohoo, everything's going to stay the same. We just keep doing our thing, and they're not paying attention. It's the people. I think what I really got most out of that video, that with Joe Rogan and that Randall guy, was that the people who are paying attention, who are aware, they're self-reliant, they're self-aware, they're situationally aware. They're watching the signs. They're watching the communities. They're watching the government. They're watchful. People who are watchful
and involved.
Yeah. And involved, because you can't just sit on the sidelines and expect everything to go, the wrong direction. People need to realize that right now, part of the reason why we are in such a dire strait is because too many people have been sitting around waiting for somebody else to do something. Mm-hmm. We got to get up and off of our assets, and we got to start doing some work. Well, we got to change the government right now if we can. We got to change the political scene if we can. We got to change. We got to start local, think global, start local, act local, but do things every day that we can better our situation. And that's not just, learning how to woodwork or be a carpenter. It might be go out to your school board and make sure that your kids are getting taught the right things in the school, so that your next generation is going to grow up with those same skill sets, with that same mentality, with that same self-reliance, that ability to then because you don't want to be 80 years old and you're physically incapable, and all your grandkids ran the world into hell in the handbasket, and you're like, now what do I got to do? I just gotta, you don't want that either. So we gotta teach the next generation, and that's how leaders really work. Leaders make and create more leaders. And that's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I teach my kids. Look, we're leaders.
Who is it that said, I think it was Ronald Reagan that said that, not communism, but essentially communism was only one generation away, or loss of freedom was only one generation away. Right. And, I look at my kids and I look back to my parents and see the difference between the way my parents raised us and kind of refused to change as things got more and more involved with technology and everything, and they didn't catch up, and I understand that now. I don't want to be that person. I want to be just kind of stuck where I'm at. I don't want to change, and I want my kids to be more like me, which they're not. They're going their own ways, right? And I think that's inevitable. There's nothing I can do about that. Well, there's very little I can do about that, I guess. But at least I can set the example and say, what? My parents, they held the line. I can say that they held the line as hard and as long as they could, and tried not to change and keep us from departing in that path, And I guess I'm trying to do the same too. It's like, what? Hold back, come up to the property here. Let's turn some dirt over. Let's do some work, right? Whereas they, no, we want to go skateboarding or swimming or play video games or whatever, that's a hard thing for me to cope with at the moment. It's, I'm up here by myself, the son wanted to take a break for this weekend. He usually comes up with me and it's in good times, but things change, and I'm not so keen on that anymore, I don't think.
Well, he's also that age where it's harder.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
tough.
he's inundated with things, but it's harder because he wants to be his own man too. I remember at that age, my dad would have me working with him, and he was paying me at his job sites, and I didn't want to be there. All my friends were going to Six Flags, and I'm like, I want to go to Six Flags. But I was
you
like,
need
no,
some money to go to
tomorrow.
Six Flags, right?
And I'm like, but I want to go to Six Flags. I mean, I grew up in Colorado. It was actually called Elitch Gardens. Now it's Six Flags. Haven't been there since it changed its name, but I was so bent I wanted to go that I actually walked off the job. I don't think my dad's ever been so mad at me. I'll have to ask him if there's other times. That was probably peak time angry. And I walked home like 5 miles to get home through these neighborhoods and weird trails. But did my friends go? No, they did not. Those jerks did not go. They hyped it up pretty good, but they didn't go because they didn't have jobs to have money to be able to go do that. Their parents weren't going to just pay for it. And I learned a very valuable lesson. I was not allowed to go back to work for my dad. I lost my job because I was a dummy. But it created in me a desire to actually work more and actually figure things out. And the next year, the next summer, when I had an opportunity to work, I got a job that paid almost as good as my dad's, but it required me to be even more responsible. And I took all the lessons I learned from my dad and apply it. And it's like, your son is going to take all those lessons he's learned from you out on the property, building a Quonset with all these weird guys that are your friends and your brothers, his uncles. Like, he's learning from those things. And that, pairs, same thing with your kids and same thing with my kids. Like, we're teaching them. And if we can teach them, not just by what we tell them, but more by example and involvement, we're going to save that next generation the same way our parents helped us. And that's I think that's why preparedness, that's why prepping, you throw the air quotes around, like it's a catchy phrase or a catchy name or tagline or sort of title for a little bit about what it is, but it's really understanding our heritage and understanding the possibilities of where we can go and simplifying so that we're in tune with God, simplifying so that we know his plan and that we align with his plan, because his plan's always better than ours. His plan's always better than ours. And those people in that video that knew what was going on, they were in tune with God too. That's the key.
Yep. And it goes back to your Indian proverb too, Shane, that wisdom is, doing what you're supposed to do, what you're put here to do. And there's no better way I've ever found to know what I'm supposed to do than in prayer and prayer to God, and say, hey, what do I do? What do you want me to do? What do I need to be doing? Who's the man that you want me to be? And it's always better than the man that I ever thought I was, could create or make up for myself. So that's legit. That's really true.
Amen.
So thanks again, guys, for watching or listening for the last 45 minutes or so. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate you spending some time with us, and hope that you're getting some value out of our podcast and out of our video if you're watching on YouTube. We really want to help people be prepared and be ready for what's coming to the world. And we recognize that by looking to the past, we really can be prepared and ready for the future. There's some great stories throughout history. There's some great stories in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and other books, other civilizations that have great heroes that rose up and did things that we would call today as preppers and had foreknowledge and used that skill set of being self-reliant to better their situation. And we really want you guys to recognize that we have a lifestyle that we've loved, and we want to share it with you guys. So we're so grateful that you spend the time listening. Make sure you hit up our website, preppertalkradio.com. You add your email to our email list so that we can stay in touch and stay in contact whenever we have any events or any products or services that might be of value to anybody. There's things that we all need to get in order to be prepared and be ready. And so we might as well work together to find each other the best deals. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we want to do. And one of those best deals that we've ever found is a place called Jase Medical. Jase Medical has what's called the Jase case, and it's a supply of antibiotics. They have a link, or we have a link in the description below. where you can click that link. If you use the code Prepper Talk, you'll get $10 off your order. We did an interview with the CEO of Jase Medical, Sean Rowland, Dr. Sean Rowland, a couple of podcasts ago. So if you go back and listen to that, I think you'll get a lot of value out of it and why that's so important.
It was really good. Yeah, I enjoyed that talk.
So thank you again for being with us. Thanks for staying ready-minded, and stay ready, get ready, stay ready, and be ready. We'll talk to you next week.